Well, good morning. John, good morning from North Carolina. How you doing, John? How's North Carolina this morning? Intel Land. Chinese are here in Angeles City for goods and services offered, just like you and many others. You can't control them, but you should be able to control your actions. Well, that's true, but the West Philippine Sea has nothing to do with that. Tim, China has always been a thorn in the world's side, in my opinion. Michael is here. Staff Sergeant Galen Turner, USMC. Hello, Sergeant Galen. How are you? I hope you're having a good day. I hope everybody can hear me. We're just getting this kicked off. We have a lot. You know what? Today's discussion and live stream can be very whatever you want to make it of it. Scott Ferris. Good morning, Scott. You have to separate the Chinese people from the Chinese government. The Chinese government is shit. That being said, a large part of the Chinese people are not. Sadly, those are not the ones in the PI. You know what? Copal, I'm only really referring to the government and government businesses, and even some private industry businesses, because many of those Chinese businesses are indeed governed by, ruled by, organized by, on beholden to the Chinese government. A lot of it's intertwined. But what's more important than any of that right now is simply having to understand just how critical this issue is. So before we get kicked off on that, I'd like to tell everybody thank you for dropping by, number one. Number two, hey, if you're not a subscriber, we'd certainly appreciate it if you would subscribe. And we'd certainly appreciate it if you are a subscriber, hitting that thumbs up. Or even if you're not a subscriber, that will help promote this, which will indeed help us as well. So I'd also like to say, look, you know what? For those of you that are visiting because of the thumbnail or seeing this on replay, you should recognize that we try and look. I'm a very analytical person, and we try and look at things on both a micro and a macro scale. And I had a conversation with my brother 2 nights ago, and I was shocked, absolutely shocked, about how little news in the U.S. or mainstream media news in the U.S. that the Philippine Sea and South China Sea issues have come up. So, I thought, let's just point this out. And as I did the research for it, and then all of the sudden, the video we set loose this morning is just outperforming most of the videos we've ever done. So I think we'll end up doing multiple parts because how it affects everybody globally, all right, not just their attitude, but the physical way it impacts globally, the entire world, is astounding. It just is. Michael, if the Philippines would use chopsticks to eat food and not their hands, China would leave them alone. I don't think so, Michael. I'll be honest with you. I don't think the Chinese have any intention of occupying or invading mainland Philippines. They want that control choke point, in my opinion. And we'll talk about that later. Ricky Lass. Good morning, Ricky. How are you doing? Hope you guys are doing well. Actually, we hope everybody's doing well. We really and truly do. We went out to dinner last night. Group of friends went out. We bar hopped a little bit. And I was actually quite amazed to see that there are so many tourists. Walking Street was very busy last night. Wow, for a Sunday night, it was. Interestingly enough. There are a lot of Filipinos concerned about pogos being sleeper cells with some of their operations located close to Philippine military installations. Hector, I think that's a concern. In the U.S., they're having big concerns about Chinese-owned businesses operating as, agriculture, farming, and other things near U.S. military installations. And in fact, it's been a big deal. A couple of them have been had county commissions stop them from being able to open. Dardo's Journey. Hola, senor. I can tell you that unless you are looking for it, I have not seen many Philippines Chinese other than meeting in San Francisco. Tons of Israel news and news feeds. Oh, obviously. And Israel is a big issue. I'm not downplaying that by any way, shape, or means. Okay? But I think Dardos is correct that, the issue in the West Philippine Sea has been going on for years. And yet it's not publicized much, if at all, in the mainstream media, I don't think. Copal, how you doing, Copal? Sunday fun day. Well, we'll find out. Arlen let me know already today it's going to be a Sunday grocery store day, which is not something I'm highly impressed with. But, happy wife, happy life. Got to do what you got to do. John says, partly because our government leadership does not want the mainstream media talking about it. Just my opinion. That's very true, John. It could be. We all know that the news in any country is biased. We all know that the news in every country, the vast majority of the news in most countries, all right, is very biased and politically motivated. Ruby, good morning, Ruby. Oh, I hope you stick around for a while. I really want your comments and thoughts on this. Todd, howdy, Dr. Mike. I hope you're well. I enjoyed your Halloween video today. I've been catching up on your videos. Current topic is relevant. Thanks. Thank you, Todd. Thank you very much. We had a blast over Halloween. We actually did. Pretty much wore me out. And it's glad to see you again. I know you've been busy. Michael says, every small town in America has a Chinese restaurant, even the ones that have no other places. Yeah, and many of them are not run by Chinese, but that's still relative. Says, Dardo says, come on, senor. All husbands enjoy spending every day and every single hour and minute with their loving wives, being sarcastic. You know what? I actually do enjoy my time with Arlen, doing the things that we do. Grocery shopping is just not one of my most favorite things. But we probably should get started on the topic here soon. Concurrently, China is trying to fund a land bridge across Thailand to shorten the route that you showed on your last video. They're trying to fund it, yes. All right? They don't want it. They do not want that. In addition, and there's a specific reason, but I think that would be a great thing. And the reason, but it'd be a negative for some other factors. And in one of our future videos, we're going to show you why. But essentially, that would make the West Philippine Sea, or the entirety of the South China Sea as important, a choke point. But let's talk about it for a second. Let's talk about China, since everybody seems to be relatively well focused on it. So I don't know how many of you recognize how this globally impacts things. First off, we could talk about the fact that China just has total disregard for the economic zone, as it was actually won in arbitrary through the Hague Convention of the UNESCO. All right. Secondly, I don't know how many of you recognize that, if you look at a map, and we're going to do a video, we're going to do a series of videos on this. So please do hit the notify button so that you can see these, because my video this morning, I did not expect it to really blow up the way it did and is. But what's happened is that you need to look at the geographic displacement of everything. So if you can imagine in your mind, all right, you've got Taiwan, and that is a critical choke point into the South China Sea. Except when Kamala Harris visited Taiwan, China got pissed off, and they showed the world in about 12 hours just how quickly they could blockade and shut Taiwan down completely. So that is a relative choke point that they've been able to establish. Now, if they continue in the West Philippine Sea, all right, they've got 3 bases or 3 built up islands there right now. All right, one of them is substantial. And when I say substantial, it has a long range landing strip. It has anti-aircraft missiles. It has anti-ship missile installations. It has long-range radar. The list goes on. One is more of an outpost, and one is still being built on. All right. If you can control that area, all right, you now extend your choke point on the entire South China Sea all the way, completely. Because if you look at where cargo moves, people don't seem to realize cargo is the lifeblood of every country. All right. Goods and services shipped and imported, export and import. If you control all of that, then you control a lot of stuff. If you're able to just threaten a country and say your shit is not going to go through here, well, guess what? It's not. Okay? You're looking at Thailand. You're looking at the closest route, actually, through Malaysia into India. You're looking at Laos. You're looking at Cambodia. You're looking at the Philippines. All right? People may not realize it, but over 40% of the entire world's shipping goes through the South China Sea. All of China's major ports are south. Okay? All of them. So if you control 40% of the world's trade, that's what I'm talking about. If you can threaten 20% of the world's trade, that is having leverage that is just unspeakable. Absolutely unspeakable. Let's see. Let me catch up on a couple comments here. Copal says, concurrently, China is trying to fund a land bridge. Oh, yeah, I did that already. Dale, how you doing, Dale? Hope you're doing well. I live near Hill Air Force Base, Utah, and know a lot of people who work there. We've had a number of incidents involving lost and confused Chinese tourists who accidentally attempted to enter the base. Actually, you know what, Dale? I've seen news reports about that. I actually have. And that's not the only place that this happened at all. There was even that incident of the lost and confused visitor to Mar-a-Lago while Trump was president, who ultimately turned out to be a spy. They showed she was a spy, but nothing really ever came out of it. Michael says, China wants control of every aspect of trade routes, land, sea, air, and roads. Yes. And they're doing a very good job of it. All right. Ruby says, Dardos, I'm sure it's reciprocal feeling with your loving wives wanting to spend most of their time with their husbands. You're just naive if you believe this. I love Ruby's humor. Tim Husk, Dale Murray, confused tourist. Yeah, well, and that's what it comes across as. Michael, the one thing China is doing with the artificial islands is building aircraft carriers and battleships for military defense and aggression at the same time. Actually, you're right. It's a base. It's a forward operating base. Instead of having to fly a bomber 2.5 hours out of China to piss somebody off or scare somebody in the middle of the South China Sea, they've got landing strips, fuel, and planes stationed. You're absolutely correct. Ruby, this issue with the Spratlys Island contention by China has been going on since the 70s. Absolutely, it has. It has, Ruby. But by international legal convention, okay, it belongs to the Filipinos. And it should belong to the Filipinos. Michael, China's trying to get control of all shipping with the Belt and Road Project, and they already have control of ports around the world. They can use them as military bases and already are. And yes, Michael, they are. In fact, they're doing it in Africa at a much quicker rate. They loan money and they get concessions. That's what happens. It's their Belt and Road Initiative, and I dare say it's a terrible thing right now. Bryce says, people love to complain about the Koreans taking over Angeles City, but we should all be thankful it's not the Chinese who are taking over instead. Bryce, at one time, there was a large contingent of Chinese bars in Angeles City many years ago. Why they abandoned that, I have no idea. Maybe they felt the pogos were better. Maybe they felt it was too much out there in their face. I have no idea. But what I am saying is, here we sit with everything that's going on. All of these Chinese things. Now, there are some bright points, I guess, is the way to say this. All right. Number one, the current administration in both countries, the U.S. and the Philippines, has enhanced and worked to improve on the visiting forces agreement between the Philippines and the U.S. You've got the new bases. And again, I will stress, people need to understand that there's a lot of misinformation on that. These are not bases being built by America. These are existing Filipino bases where the U.S. is leasing areas inside for it to have a presence. And there are new bases being built by whoever. Maybe they're being built through contractors through the U.S. Maybe they're being built by Filipinos. But they are Philippine government installations. And that's that's what's happening, especially up north. And there's another one being built in Palawan. I think there's already one or two being used in Palawan. So, we see this, I see this as a good thing because, where the Chinese are sitting out there in the Spratlys, Guam is a 4.5-hour flight. Even by fighter jet, it's at 2.5 hours. And then it's got to refuel. It's effectively worthless by the time it gets here. So, I really like that. I really do. Now, I don't know, there's still a lot of animosity towards America or American military in the Philippines, and rightfully so. I mean, we fought them. We had a war with them. We occupied the Philippines. I mean, our track record as humanitarians, not that awfully great when you come right down to it, until we left. Dardos, the loan money and countries have to use Chinese labor materials. It's a win-win Chinese with no risk. Even if they know that the countries won't be able to pay it back, they have the leverage. And yes, Dardos, and that's exactly what happened here. Many of you may be aware of the railway system that is being expanded on. And those were 5 legs, 5 projects, all being funded through the Chinese. Well, they had issues in this because of pandemic mostly, but they didn't meet some of the requirements needed to continue that program. And the present administration canceled it and refinanced it at a much better rate with the Japanese. Ruby says it's the same scenario that China is setting their control over the Pacific Islands like Fiji and Vanuatu and the Solomon Islands and others. That's where Australia is more focused. Absolutely. And you know what? I see this new joint efforts between coalitions of Japanese, Australian, American forces trying to thwart that. Ruby, I really do. I see a lot of it. I just hope it'll continue. I really and truly do. Darter says, and probably no warranties on the projects due to faulty building materials. I do not know. I don't know. I did not have a look at the actual contracts. So, Dickie says the West will not lift a finger when China invades Taiwan. No, it won't. We don't have an agreement to do that. What we will do, I believe, is we will supply Taiwan with many different types of arms. All right. We have an agreement to do something similar to that. But unlike the VFA, the Visiting Forces Agreement with the Philippines, we do not have that kind of agreement. And it would be actually, I think, illegal. It would take an act of Congress for us to put troops into Taiwan, and it would be probably a worthless effort. I mean, they showed how, China showed that in 12 hours, they could blockade that entire country. They covered it with ships, monitoring the ship lanes. They surfaced a couple of submarines out there. They flew fighters and bombers. I mean, they made it very clear. If they want it, it's theirs. Michael says in Michigan, China is pushing 3 to 4 electric car battery plants backed by state of Michigan tax breaks. Michigan has the largest fresh water in the world. China water is contaminated, toxic levels. I don't know much about that, Michael, but certainly we'll take your word for it. Ruby says most Chinese settled in the Philippines were mostly from Taiwan and Hong Kong, which you can see from the food influences had on the Philippines. Yes, Ruby's absolutely correct. And most of the Chinese that you will meet here come from old money, all right? And most of the Chinese are, they were looking, I mean, when you look at what's transpired in Hong Kong since it got turned over by the British, okay? A lot of Chinese were looking for a more democratic method of doing business. Okay, sorry about that. Todd says, unfortunately, I must refrain from publicly expressing my opinions, which are very similar to yours, but I work for an S&P 50 international company, but I'm enjoying the show. And Todd, I certainly understand that. That I totally understand. phdating.com. That's actually Kuya John from Philly's channel, if I'm not mistaken. Welcome, John. How are you doing? Tin Whistle. Good morning, sir. Well, good morning back to you. Dale says the Philippines already has a rapidly growing economy. The expansion of the U.S. military's presence in the Philippines should inject a lot of money into the Philippine economy. You know what? I think maybe you're right, but on the other hand, I don't think it's going to be a significant amount of money. We're not stationing thousands of troops like in Japan, okay? We're not building bases. We're not putting together. You're never going to see housing and schools and medical facilities for Americans or for veterans here based on that fact. Those things are not going to happen. The Philippines, rightfully so, I really do believe this. The Philippines has said, you know what? We don't want people stationed here, on temporary duty, helping, humanitarian aid. We're all willing to work together. And as a deterrent force, we're willing to do that. Because keep in mind, it doesn't matter if China drops a bomb over here that kills 100 Americans or 1,000 Americans. The retaliation and repercussions are going to be the same. Dardos says, didn't Japan said that they would come to... Yes, I left out Japan, Dardos. You're absolutely correct. Japan is working. In fact, if I'm not mistaken, the Japanese prime minister was just, or not prime minister, but one of those guys was just here. They just met with him. China has monopolized much of the world's key natural resources for industrial use. Fresh water is what they're missing. The Great Lakes are a target for them, and they are getting their foot in the door. You know what, Michael? That's true. And I'll tell you what else is a target for them. Africa. The deserts of Africa. And the reason why, and we happen to know this because a friend of ours who passed away last year, I'm sad to say, a friend of ours was from Uganda, all right? Old family, there for many years, a lot of land, stuff like that. His business was sand. I mean, the Chinese were buying entire container ships full of sand. And they need sand because that's what you got to have to mix concrete. Sand is a big deal. It was less expensive for them to dig it, ship it, and use it from Uganda to China than it was for them to create sand locally, because the sand, I guess, it's something to do with the quality of the sand. It's like highly refined naturally, I guess, in the desert. So, but with that being said, so these choke points are very critical, and the Chinese would be at a point where not only could they leverage people's ability to compete with world trade, but think about it. Couldn't they sit there and say, if you want to go through the West Philippine Sea, which is now our area, if you want to go through the South China Sea, you got to pay a tax. Can you imagine if 40% of the world's goods had to pay a tax to get to and from? 40%. I mean, do you recognize 40% of the world's cargo trade goes in and out of the South China Sea? That's a huge, huge issue. All right. Now, what does that mean? Well, it means a couple of different things. First off, if they continue to push, if the Chinese continue to push, the price of goods coming from Southeast Asia is going to rise. All right. Manufacturing is going to go down. So to make up for that, manufacturing has to take place somewhere else. And since it takes place somewhere else, the cost is going to go up. So you're going to pay, if you're sitting at home in the U.S. right now, if you're sitting at home in the U.K. right now, even if you're sitting at home in Australia right now, you're going to be paying more. And you may actually be limited. One of the things to keep in mind is that the U.S. is literally the breadbasket of the world. We don't supply the entire world of food. We're not the largest world supplier. And we're not because the U.S. government pays farmers not to produce. All right? They pay ranchers not to produce milk. They pay farmers not to farm crops in certain areas so that the farmers are guaranteed reasonable prices. That being said, what if it doesn't go anywhere? What if it can't get to Southeast Asia? What happens if corn, for instance, can't get out? What happens if wheat can't get out? Remember during pandemic how the price of bread, which thank God it's not like in America or Europe, but the price of, and when I say not like it, what I mean is that it's not as prevalent, but the price of bread in Southeast Asia and in other countries skyrocketed. It got expensive as crap. And the reason was because of getting wheat out of the U.S. Now, the biggest producer of wheat, unfortunately, all right, is actually the Ukraine. But that's a whole nother issue. Percy says even the sand in China is junk. And it may be. Maybe that's why they're shipping it from Africa. Our friend who passed away was relatively well off. Okay? And for a Ugandan, he was very well off. And it all came from sand, selling sand. Michael says, when I drove concrete trucks back in the 90s, the freighters from China would be loaded. We could not get cement dust. Michigan had 3 major plants on the Great Lakes, and China would get from all 3. Wow. And there you go. That's it. China, well, you know what? China doesn't want a physical war with anybody because nobody wins that nowadays. We don't fight wars like they were 50 years ago. So China doesn't want a physical war. And I'm going to tell you, the first person that uses a nuke will be the last person to use a nuke. All right? That's not a real way that it works, unless it's like a terrorist organization or something. But it's economic control. Economic control is what will drive it. Bryce says, in addition to China trying to control the choke points in the sea, let's not forget that China also caused the worldwide COVID pandemic to happen. It's possible, you know. That's one of the things that actually we can't discuss on YouTube, that we can't really talk about it. YouTube has really cracked down on medical discussions that aren't approved by or accepted by the WHO. Several very large YouTube physicians that have YouTube channels had their channels shut down in the past 90 days. Mike Simpson, good topic. Thank you, Mike. Thank you so much. And welcome. Nice to see you again. Michael says, what people need to understand, China built cities for almost 200 million people in 10 years. Largest exodus of humans in history of rural to civil living. You know what? I love economics. I love global economics. I love a lot of interesting stuff. It's interesting to me, and it may not be interesting to you. But I've seen two separate studies, and I couldn't believe either one of them. But I wonder that, you know, where there's smoke, there's fire. All right? But both of those studies from reputable think tanks say that China has enough empty housing for every Chinese family in all of China. I find that hard to believe when you consider how many Chinese people there are. But then we have to also understand how many of them are already housed. All right? I mean, there are entire ghost cities in China. I mean, you know, and what really surprises me is that people do not, how this does not hit the mainstream media in the U.S. I would wonder that if we have anybody here from the UK currently living in the UK, is the mainstream media in the UK, do they cover these types of things and what's going on? I would really like to know. Honestly, I would. Michael's Atos says, just think of it this way. China built the USA in a 10-year period. It took the USA 150 years to build. Yeah, that's probably pretty true, Michael. Also, a big portion of what China built, they're having huge construction issues due to corruption, all kinds of issues of subpar material, subpar paperwork, subpar products, subpar construction methodology. I saw a video the other day, quite honestly, that was showing a condo in China, and what happened was it had fake walls. And if you, it was crazy. It's hard for me to describe it. It really is. So Michael says, think of it this way. Yes, already did that. Bipolar. Shenzhen is a perfect example and went from 300,000 to 15 million in 10 years. Yeah. Wow. And that's a third of what's the population of China? That's not a third of the population, but it's a chunk in one city. Okay? But I want to know where that stands. In fact, after the live, if some of you would do me a favor, is go back, hit the replay, like it and comment about how the news in your area is covering what's going on in the West Philippine Sea. All right. I mean, these Chinese are being more and more aggressive. They have crushed Filipino fishermen. They have killed Filipino fishermen. It has happened. All right. There are boats hitting boats. And now you need to recognize, there's a huge, one of the things that makes the West Philippine Sea so desirable is that there are multiple studies out there showing that there's a great deal of oil and gas under that shelf. And that shelf is in like 35 feet of water tops. It's got tons and tons of shoals and reefs, so that getting through that area is really, very set and restricted. It is. And so if you park 3 or 4 boats in the middle of that passage, you essentially shut that whole area off. All right. You can't maneuver. You can't take another bigger boat through there. And that's what the Chinese have been doing. All right. In addition to that, they've used high-powered lasers and used them all to hinder the eyesight of Philippine craft. They've used water cannons. They just used water cannons again day before yesterday. Excuse me. And we're going to do a whole set of videos on all of it. So let's see here. Michael says China built ghost cities. The China CCP did this to keep the economy growing so the citizens had a way to invest their money. It was a way to keep the citizens occupied on other things. Yes, absolutely, Michael. And unfortunately, they're going bankrupt. 2 of the 5 largest development companies in China are either bankrupt or being supported by the government. And in the case of, I think it's Evergreen or something like that, the government has said, we can't even cover this. We can't do it. People are going to lose money. BT and Betty from right down the road from us over there by Mount Arayat. In northern Zambales, there's a Chinese company quarrying gravel 24 hours a day. Wonder where that's going on those barges. Well, it would only have one choice. It's got to be going on in Subic. There's just no way around it. That's where it's got to be shipped. I mean, there's private shipping inside and out of that. Howdy there, BT. Copal, China does not have the same standards as the West. Some of their major projects are failing. There's plenty of coverage on it, but not from the main street. Exactly, Copal. I started looking into this a year ago and watching it. And, it wasn't until I had that conversation with my brother 2 nights ago that I realized it's not covered in the U.S. I would love to know whether it's being covered in Australia and whether it's being covered in Britain or the UK. Bryce says the mainstream media in the U.S. seems to be more concerned about how China uses TikTok to spy on Americans. Well, I'm sure it's a legitimate concern, but I think they need to focus on some other areas, to be honest with you, just like you. Our Little World says the Chinese population as of 2021 is 1.4 billion. So 1.4 billion in Shenzhen is 300 million, one city. So that gives you an idea. Thank you, Our Little World. I really appreciate that. I didn't have to look it up. Very little on the news in Kansas, according to Mike. Only time I get an update is online about China. China invested heavy in our media to silence it. I believe you. I really do. I think China's invested heavy on media and politicians, but I'll keep my mouth shut about that. Michael says, I can tell you this. The kids from China attending Michigan State University have silly, crazy money. I've seen $500,000 cars all over town driving in a snowstorm. Yes. And you know what it reminds me of? It likens me, that statement reminds me of when I was in college and the big uproar was all about the Saudis and the Middle Eastern kids going to college and having tons of money. And they were the ones driving Porsches and Ferraris, not so much Ferraris back then, but lots of Porsches and Mercedes. They had silly money. Percy says 1,425,489. 425,489,174 at mid-year. So there you go. All right. So BT wants to know, do we have a tree up in the condo, Mike? We have a tree. It's just not up yet. It's just too early for me to get into that putting a tree up thing. That's something that we traditionally did as a child. Was the day after Thanksgiving, the day before Thanksgiving, the tree would go up. And it's not there yet. So that's what it is. So what else is new? Well, we've got China. All right. In addition to China, we've got Angeles City. We've got all the goings-ons here. It's not really much of a change. We are seeing more tourists. I can tell you, we were out last night, and it was busy for a Sunday night. Sunday night is the night we prefer to go out because it's not as busy, and it was busy. We're seeing a lot more Westerners than we were 3 months ago. I would say we're getting pretty equal as to the number of Westerners to the number of Asians that we see out. That was interesting. So, but I was very surprised to see last night the things that were going on. I really and truly was. Hey, you know what? Let me put in a shameless plug here. If you are watching this on replay or you're currently in here and you're not a channel, not subscribed, please do subscribe to the channel. We cover a lot of stuff. Arlene and I are just normal, everyday people. Okay? We travel. We have a home in Mindanao. We have a home here in Angeles City. In the past year, we've done Boracay, we've done Bohol, we've done Thailand, we've done Zambales, Subic. I mean, we're just normal people. What we don't do restaurant stuff unless it's disgusting. And when I say disgusting, it's generally not the food, but the service. Okay? I'm not ashamed to say, you know what? We went and the service was horrible. But generally because we just don't do restaurant stuff. We don't do walking street videos at night. Not that there's anything wrong with them, but it's just not our cup of tea. And there are plenty of other people that do it. It's just not the direction that we go. Other than that, we just do what it is that's going on. What's current, what's realistic, how we live our life. And sometimes, we'll answer questions about, do you need help understanding this or that? We don't do consultations. That's also not our cup of tea. No, nothing bad about people that do. I just don't have the patience for it. So, BT says, looks like his is going up today. Copal says, Confucius Institute in all of the top universities around the world, arm of the CCP. Some are waking up. Yeah. You know what? The Chinese are involved Do you know that the Chinese actually have their own secret police in the United States, in many of the major cities? They do. They're not a legal law enforcement, but they watch their population. They watch for dissent. It would not surprise me if someone from China was not in this channel right now recording it. That would not surprise me at all. Christopher says, are there casinos or card rooms? Yes, Christopher, there are 2 poker rooms that I know of, and there are, a lot of casinos, especially out on Clark. Han Casino, Royce, a couple more right there out on Clark, which is a 10-minute drive from where we live. There's Casino Philippines, right down the street. But yes, there are casinos and card rooms. Now, they're different than American casinos, just so you know. All right? They are not nearly as elaborate, not nearly as big. Well, I guess that's not really true. There's a lot of small casinos in Vegas, but they're not as elaborate and as big, generally speaking. Now in Manila, you've got Resort World, you've got City of Dreams, and those are fairly large. Not all casinos have dice games. All right. I love to play craps, but not all casinos have craps. But half a dozen different kinds of poker, half a dozen slot machines, roulette, they've got all that stuff. Absolutely. Ken Unger, good morning. How you doing, Ken? Hope you're doing well. Hope you're having a great day. Hey, BT, good to see you. Robert, the old Chna, just got the notice. Good morning, Mike. Hello, Robert. How are you doing? I hope you're 100% recovered now. For those of you that, like me, you would really like the old Chna. Robert is a great YouTube channel. I highly suggest that you give him a try. I really do. Hope you're doing well, Robert. Terry, Pleasant, Davao, right now, not getting close to your personal space, Mike. You can come on over. You can get close to my personal space. Come on down. We can, you know what? We can meet up in Mindanao. We have a home about, I don't think it's like 6 hours by personal vehicle to Davao, up near Surigao City. BT, Clark has a few casinos, absolutely. Copal saying hey to the old Chna. Michael, I took my wife out to a Chinese videoke bar by the university and shit. When I saw all the Chinese guys ordering meals over $100 each, we were eating on the value menu. Yeah. You know what? And I don't have a problem with that. I mean, that's not my issue. There are a lot of good Chinese people who have made good businesses, who have made money. But I hate doing business with the Chinese. I've attempted to do business with the Chinese many, many years ago. All right. I don't like what China is doing, and I'm not a fan of the Chinese. And I am not going to hold back and just say it. That's just all there is to it. Terry says it's called hide in plain sight. There you go. Some suspects in the room for sure. I'm sure. You know what, Copal? I hope the Chinese are watching it. I hope they are. And I want them to know that we have a community of people that are well aware of what's going on. Percy's building new ones. Yep. Ruby, here in Australia, news coverage of what China is doing relative to Australia. That topic of Chinese police operating in Australia has been featured lately. Chinese officials believe it's their right to operate. Yes, Ruby, absolutely. They're not legal police. They're not they can't arrest anybody. But if you know the Chinese, they can make life miserable for you. And vast majority of Chinese that are overseas have family back in the mainland. And it's an ugly situation. They had several news articles lately about these Chinese special police in San Francisco, San Diego, LA, New York, Chicago. There was another place as well. Good morning from Sydney. Hey, Bulldog, how you doing? How's Sydney this morning? Ruby's from that neck of the woods. Actually, I don't know exactly how far Ruby is from Sydney. I hate to say it, I'm not real good with the Australian geography. That's a pretty sad thing, I guess. The old canoe says, saw you giving Navy guy shit on Brian's live. Was laughing my ass off, but true. Covering banking on my next vid. Yeah, why don't you cover banking? Please do. All right? I've covered it twice, and people just don't seem to understand. They really and truly don't. But maybe they'll like it from you better. Ruby says Chinese officials even threatened Australian, formerly Chinese citizens bordering on blackmailing their family. Yeah, Ruby, that's exactly what I was saying. Isn't that crazy? How much do they need to control the narrative? That's what they're doing. They're trying to control the narrative. Michael Atos, I saw you last night in one of your best movie roles of all time, The Dirty Dozen. You know what? I loved The Dirty Dozen. Telly Savalas did a great job. He played the perfect psychopath. I loved The Dirty Dozen. I thought that was great. I really and truly did. Christopher Leroy, big old smile. Thanks, Christopher. Australia is a big pace, Bulldog says. Indeed. Indeed it is. LG, haven't heard from you in a while. Hope you're doing well. Everyone knows what China is doing, but can stop the number 2 strongest in the country in the world, and it will be by bypassing the USA. Hopefully not in my lifetime. So let me read this again. Everyone knows what China is doing, but can stop the number 2 strongest economy in the world. It will be bypassing the USA. I'm not sure what you're saying, LG. I don't think that, everyone needs to keep in mind, China decides what its money is worth. Okay? So therefore, its reports of what its economy is like is not something that I would deal with as being really factual. Copal says, I get Australian 60 Minutes in my news feed for some reason. They cover some good stuff. Another channel I think Murdoch owns shows up too. They go hard on the left. Yeah, well, that makes sense that Murdoch would go hard on the left. Michael says, Ruby is 44 houses, 3 apartment buildings, and 6 stoplights away from Sydney. Okay, well, let's not be doxing people, Mike. Be careful. Oh, Cano, watch the video on how the Chinese are buying up property in Australia and mining minerals. Yeah, they're doing it everywhere, Robert. They're doing it everywhere. And you know something? I can look right now. Let me just do this. I'm interested to see. Wait. My videos, which typically don't perform anywhere near this. This China video has over 600 views in the first 4 hours. Now, granted, that's nothing compared to those monster channels. But for that, that's a lot of views. There are a lot of people interested in this, as far as I'm concerned. And that's why we've decided we're going to go in depth. We are going to continue to report on this. We are going to put together a better, much, much better set of videos that covers history of the South China Sea, what the Chinese are doing, and how it impacts the rest of the world globally. Because if the Chinese are allowed to put that choke point up, we are all in deep shit. All right. It'll be horrible. I mean, you think about it, other than Davao, all right, there are no major cargo ports on the Pacific side of the Philippines. That means everything, in vast majority of stuff being imported into the Philippines has to come into the West Philippine Sea. And if China controls that choke point, it could be horrible. Absolutely horrible. Ruby says, Michael, it's more like 12-hour drive on 100 kilometer per hour, 110 kilometer. Okay, so Ruby, that's a long ways. So, Ruby, how big is the city that you live in? You don't have to tell us the city, but how big is that city? What's the population? You know, I mean, I'm pretty sure you guys live at least in a suburb of a very large place. Chinese and Indians are the ones raising house prices in Australia. They buy them cash, makes it harder for locals to get into the housing market. Yes, and in Australia, Ruby, correct me, but can a foreigner own land? Are they buying actual land also? I'm pretty sure they can, but I don't know. But Ruby would know, that's for sure. So anyways, getting back to these choke points, it is horrible. Now, I am very, very hopeful and very positive on the visiting forces agreement between the U.S. and the Philippines, because the U.S. is not going to allow the Chinese to take over the South China Sea. They just will not do it. They won't do it. All right. You've got a carrier group, an entire carrier group, along with the rest of the ships. You've got Marines. You've got Air Force. There might, I don't know. Yeah, I guess there's Army also, all in Japan. But that's still 4 hours away. All right. But that being said, they will assert their right to have free trade. They're not going to let China do it, but it may get ugly before that gets through. Mike says, have a good day. Got to get back to life. Thanks, Mike. Thank you for joining. We hope you have a good day as well. Copal says, same thing happened in Canada. They stopped foreign buying temporarily. I didn't know they stopped it. I know that they used to you could. I didn't know they stopped it. Ruby, what kind of fuel economy does your car get running on Vegemite? You know what? That's kind of funny. I am, again, you know, we're not afraid to talk about our shortcomings. I have never tasted Vegemite in my life. I have no idea what it even tastes like. One of these days, I got to try it. But the name, for some reason, it gets to me. So if you have eaten Vegemite, what would you compare it to that I might know what it is? Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, foreigners can buy and own land in Australia. Don't have to be a resident or a citizen. Wow. It's like the U.S., unfortunately. Some of the comments that you put in the screen do not show up in my live feed, senor. Censoring or bad Starlink internet? We don't use Starlink, and I have really good internet, so I don't know if it doesn't show up in the live chat. That's a YouTube issue, not us. Sorry about that. Bulldog, I live in Sydney, population of 5.35 million, 12.368 kilometers, 12,368. Bulldog, okay. Sydney's, I've never, I shouldn't say I've never been there. I've flown through there. So I've been to the airport, but not even clear customs. It was just in and out. Marmot. I'm not sure what marmot is, Bulldog. Dardos, do you have all messages selected or just top messages? I don't know what he's got selected. Solved. Thank you, Copal. There you go, Dardos. Wow, you had me a little bit concerned there for a minute. I thought YouTube was already censoring me. Vegemite is a disgusting salty vitamin spread. I do not like it. Okay? That makes me want to try it less. Copal says, glad to help. Dardo says, had to click on the live chat down arrow and select all messages option. There you go. Ruby says that they live close to Melbourne, similar distance between Manila and Angeles. Live in a city, but 20 minutes from the nicest beaches and surfing. Wow. Ruby, 20 minutes from a nice beach in a first world country? That's pretty impressive stuff. Might have to go visit. You know what? We should all schedule a meet and greet at Ruby's house and spend 3 or 4 days in Australia. I'm kidding, Ruby. We wouldn't do that to you. Michael says, my brother was a foreign exchange student in Australia in the 80s and brought back Vegemite for us to try as a kid. Of 14, it reminded me of beef bouillon cubes and butter spread. Okay. You guys are not making a positive spin on Vegemite for me to try it. I mean, right now it's ranking just slightly above balut. So, or, slightly above chicken feet as well. Love the Vegemite song from the 80s. Yeah, I love it too. Terry Pleasant. Yes. So anyways, as we continue to talk about China, what you could do as a favor to me and to Arlen is when you get a chance, come back to the replay and in the comments, tell me what you would like us to research with respect to China and what's going on. That would be an interesting situation. Ruby says 20 plus years here and dared not taste Vegemite, but Aussies love it. You know what? That's what I've heard. And I mean, there's British people I've seen that want to buy it and order it. In fact, I think there's actually a deli here in Angeles that sells it. Bulldog says, I love Vegemite. I send you some. You know what? Just hold off on that. I'm not quite sure whether I'm going to go to it. Dardos, like and subscribe, por favor. Thank you, Dardos. I really appreciate that. I said to the man, "Are you trying to tempt me?" Yeah, I remember that song. Andy, China is a pest. Indeed it is, Andy. They are thugs, bullies, and full of shit, as far as I'm concerned. I've said it before. Doing business with China is like getting sodomized by Satan. I just don't recommend it whatsoever. It's just not something that we think is a wise thing to do. We've seen how their Belt and Road Initiative is killing the people that they've been working with in debt and in obligations. I was never happier in my entire life to see the prior railway negotiations put off, canceled out, and renegotiated with the Japanese. I was tickled to death. Tickled to death. Andy says, take the Vegemite. Andy, have you actually tasted Vegemite? What did you think about it? That'd be interesting. Okay. Well, it's been an hour and 11 minutes. And it's getting late. Oh, no. Ruby, please. You don't have to go through that trouble. I'm so far, I'm pretty sure that I'm not that interested in Vegemite. But, I might sniff it. I don't know. Does it have a smell? Michael says, I'll say this about Cebu Air. It was like pulling teeth, but I got a refund. Michael, I got your email. He had a horrible experience. I just haven't gotten around to it. But I'm glad you did get a refund finally. I'm still waiting on my replacement of my DJI. That's something that we're going to be checking on today. Andy says, yuck. Dale says, thank you for the live stream. Well, you're welcome, Dale. You're welcome anytime, We have great subscribers and participants in our community. I have a great time interacting with everybody. So, with that being said, and with Andy's final comment up on the board, we will say thank you so much. We appreciate you participating. Please don't forget to subscribe and like and leave us some comments. Otherwise, we hope you have a great day, evening, whatever it is, wherever you are. Thanks so much.